Partnered by Times Influence.
The inaugural Economic Times Women's Forum brought together some of the brightest minds to chart out a roadmap to unleash the power of 500 million, the women of India. This week, we bring to you the confluence of select voices who outlined how women in the development sector, in politics, as entrepreneurs and on company boards can get themselves heard better to become equal stakeholders in an unequal world. First up, Sherry Blair, founder of the Sherry Blair Foundation for Women, addressed the forum.
India is a country very close to my heart. There is truly nowhere like it anywhere else in the world. Vibrancy and entrepreneurialism are everywhere, and it has a boundless energy that plays a huge part in India's incredible rise as a geopolitical and economic powerhouse. But I'm here with you to discuss a critical stumbling block. As I'm sure you may know, India has one of the lowest rates of female labour force participation in the world. According to the ILO, less than a third of Indian women 15 years or older are working or actively looking for a job. India's female labour force participation rate is uniquely low for all levels of education. So what does this mean? It means that India has a precious opportunity that it's overlooking and underutilising. And that opportunity is the boundless potential of Indian women. As business owners, as job creators, and as leaders in their communities. Regardless of your sector or sphere, here are a few guiding principles that I think you could all apply to unleash that power of this amazing 500 million. Be the change you wish to see in the world. If you're a creative professional, think, how can you harness your talents to improve the way women are depicted in the media? Consider, how can you use your platform to reach decision makers? If you're a CEO, be proactive in recruiting a diverse board, which includes women and other underrepresented minorities. Make tackling the pay gap or unfair conditions your priority. Support other women. Create supportive, professional networks for women in your sector and in your workplace. Listen, learn, and share with one another. Celebrate and elevate each other. Hire one another. Investing in women is often the best investment you can make because empowered women empower others. Think inclusive and act inclusive. Number 4, enlist male allies. Now, this might be the hardest feat on the list, and I'm very glad to see a scattering of brave men in this room. But you know, the reality is, men are often the gatekeepers of power. And men can play an incredibly positive role in pushing for change. I'm sure that many of you are already doing so much to celebrate and advance women in your own lives and communities. We must continue our fight until our gender no longer limits our opportunities for ourselves and for the generations to come. Thank you.
Next, we bring to you a Power Pack session which will talk about getting more women into politics and identify the major stumbling blocks for aspiring women politicians and come up with innovative ways to surmount these challenges.
The Indian Parliament has the representation of women in politics is quite low. In the Indian Parliament, it's about 11%, both the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. It is an embarrassingly low figure. So if I can ask each of you to comment on why you think this is the case and more importantly, how this can be changed.
I do believe that things will improve once you have the women's representation bill come through. We have seen over and over again that this change that the Madhya Pradesh government has brought in, and I'm not here as a spokesperson for the BJP, I'm just saying what I see at the ground level. We have a 55% reservation now that we have put in our departments.
Right.
So every single department in Madhya Pradesh is going to have a 50 to 55 representation of women. That will be a game changer, except for the forest department. At the ground level, we have 50% reservation in the local bodies.
Yeah.
So if we have 51 Jilla Panchayats, we have something like 34 Jilla Panchayat women who are the heads of their panchayats. If we have something like 14 local bodies, we have half, that's half of them are mayors, 7 mayors. So this steady rise is there. It's not doomsday. It is there and it is happening. It's just that you have to look at it. It depends on what prism you're looking at it from.
Now, when we look at the larger ecosystem, at the larger patriarchal structure of a country, I would say patriarchal most generally and misogynistic also in parts. I really think we have a lot more to do. And it is whatever is happening around you, whether it's crimes against women, whether it's the socio-economic indicators, where women's education is concerned, primary school rates are concerned, female feticide is concerned, dowry deaths are concerned. If you look at the larger ecosystem, a lot more needs to be done. Then I will place a rider as well. Is it the responsibility only of women leaders to work for women's upliftment? Do we not kind of let off the men? Because it is gender parity, gender justice, gender equality is mandated in the Constitution as a responsibility for everybody, all the lawmakers. So let's not let our lawmakers get away. It is everybody's responsibility, and I don't have to work just for women. I have to work for the marginalized sections, men and women.
What we are seeing in terms of these numbers is actually a reflection of the society we live in. Political participation and the presence of women in decision-making really has to be front, up, and center if we are looking to reduce any of the gender gaps what we are talking about, be it a gap in terms of education access, be it a gap in terms of women in the workforce, because finally these decisions are made by politicians, by people who are in decision-making roles. How do we bridge this gap? I think, first of all, a very important piece, even in terms of policies, is actually education. I think that access to education is the first thing that would give women the ability to break through many, many ceilings at different levels. Number two, I think involving women in decision-making roles, even at the local level, is extremely important. I think let's not think that it's only reservation in the parliament that's going to bring about this change. And it's very interesting to see how even at micro level. And number three is the women's reservation bill has to be passed. I think it is women from all party lines, and I think it's women from all walks of life who will have to organize together and strongly lobby and push for it. Because what we have seen with the women's reservation bill is a classic example of everyone pledging their support on the face of it, but no one actually doing anything.
May I ask you to don your BJP spokesperson or spokes hat and respond to that?
It's got to happen sooner than later. But the idea is to have strong women grassroots leaders who don't have godfathers, who don't have the backing of big families, to go out there to cultivate them. And for that, the overall ecosystem has to be encouraged, and basic safety has to be provided, and then education and other opportunities.
So would you say that things have, you've been in politics for now long, would you say that things have improved over the years?
100%. But we still have to fight. People think that I come from a privileged background. I don't. Because I've had to fight every single way. That privilege of being Rajmata's daughter hangs so heavy on my shoulders that when you go out, people are expecting you to be in a box. And when you don't do it, then they say, oh. On the other hand, the Rajmata did only this. Now you have to start doing that plus that. How do you do it? So it's a constant work in progress. And you have to fight. Even at my level, I have to fight to just keep my space and keep myself going and keep myself motivated.
I do think that ensuring women's participation in the public domain, ensuring women's participation in decision-making, ensuring women's participation in politics really needs to be the centerpiece that many of us need to come together and lobby for. That we need to organize and ensure that women get that space in politics and in decision-making.
Politics really is the heart of the matter. It is where policies are made. It is where policies are implemented. It affects our lives directly, as in what the commodities prices are, as in what policies are, as to how we lead our lives, how we conduct ourselves, what is accountability of our government servants, and so on and so forth. So my only prayer, so to speak, to all of you would be that whichever party, wherever, but political engagement, mobilization is really important. It's just not all right to be an enraged citizen. It's good to be an engaged citizen. Go out there, see what's happening, and hold your MLAs, MPs accountable time to time. Please. That makes sense.
Welcome back. Our next panel will discuss the various ways in which the participation of women in building startups can be encouraged for a better future.
So you've invested, Rajan, in a slew of women-led startups. I think you have sort of stepped up to really fill a gap that is quite obvious in the area. Just about 3% of women-led startups actually get venture funding in India. So what influenced your thinking?
If you look at India today, I know on an absolute percentage basis, the number obviously needs to improve significantly. But what I find is, in my portfolio, the women-founded companies, they tend to actually execute better, and they talk less. It's an amazing thing. You should actually promote yourselves a little more. With the women founders, I find that they focus a lot more on just building the company, building their teams, right? I think a lot of women need is also just role models, right? Just hear about these stories.
So, Vani, does gender at all play a role when you evaluate a company?
At our firm, I don't think gender plays a role when we evaluate a company. At least it doesn't play a negative role when we evaluate a company. I do think there is a role of gender that perhaps is an unconscious bias, to put it charitably, right? And I think it does play a role. The question we need to ask ourselves is, if you want to be a path breaker, kind of have to ignore those hurdles and be able to say from your deep inner conviction, they don't stop me from being who I am. And we need those in order to pave the way forward. But in tech, especially in the context of tech entrepreneurship, I think the bias is less towards gender. That's, my perspective.
Meena, so is there a particular amount of, for lack of a better term, an affirmative action that's required to increase the number of women-led startups itself?
I think we need to do something at a more broader level to encourage women and to say this is a very good option for you to consider. And to Rajan's point, role models are important. You need role models of women who have been 25 or 28 when they started, they went through their marriage, childbirth, all of that, continued through all of that and still built a business, very successful. I think the other part is the societal expectations of women to settle down by the time they get into the middle 20s. I think that has a very important role. You need some changes to happen at that level also for women to be given permission and for women to take that permission also, saying that I want to do this and that's all right, I will figure out how I navigate the other expectations from the society. So both need to work hand in hand to move the needle, because unless there is enough of volume of people wanting to be entrepreneurs, we would never do this.
Falguni, when it comes to sort of breaking glass ceilings, you've done this over and over again. What were the particular challenges that you may have sort of faced? Because, for instance, like Meena mentioned, women have even the burden of expectations, societal expectations as well, in addition to all of the challenges that they face at the workplace.
Very often I used to be asked, is there a glass ceiling, and is there a can women make it in the corporate ladder, and do women directors contribute effectively? And I thought these were all ridiculous questions, and I feel that women need to actually, in the ridiculous in the sense that I do feel that if women lean in and they want it for themselves, they can achieve it all. And that's our message. Like Nykaa also talks, all our customers, many of our customers are women, and we talk to our customers, and one of the important message we give is that like a lean in, but in a different way, saying learn to dream for yourselves and pursue your dreams, and you'll be amazed at what you achieve. And I think women are looking for that kind of empowerment. They're not bold enough to dream for themselves, and once they start dreaming for themselves, they will see the difference and they will be happy with what they achieve.
Rajan, if I could just come back to you, what will it take to get more women into actually decision-making roles?
We need more women founders, co-founders, right? I think that is the key, right? Because at the end of the day, for a long period of time, whether it's 5, 7, 10 years, after the founding of a company, I mean, the key decision makers are the founders or the co-founders and the management team. So I think the more women we can get to start up, I think the more women you'll see.
So Falguni, I'd like for you to come in at this point and say, is it really the responsibility does it lie with the woman? For instance, in scaling a company, a lot of women might choose then to say, I will not scale beyond this point because I want flexibility, you know. So
yeah, I used to think like that, and I said that women need to lean in, but I'm seeing very different women today. And we have a beautiful ad called Haseen Tu, Haseen Din, and what we say there is that today we have a defense minister who's a woman. We also, you know, in terms of, like, you know, very often you see pilots who are women or women in science, as well as, you know, today you can be an actress and a mom. I mean, so we actually tell women that these are better times. Times are definitely changing, and these are better times for women, and especially the age group that we deal with as our customers, which is 22 to 35. We are clearly seeing that. So I personally feel that, yes, women need to make that choice to want more for themselves, and that is the starting point, and then everything else can fall into place. But I already see it happening, and it's happening in a big way.
You kind of nurture, like you said, 4 out of the 10 that you've backed are women-led startups. Correct. What are the conversations that you have with them when it comes to, for instance, scaling a company, being hungry for more capital, perhaps? What are the conversations you're having with them?
See, what I find is that none of the women that we work with are looking at scaling as something that that needs to be restricted because of their gender. I mean, it's really the conversation that I had is this business scalable? How fast should it scale? What is the most appropriate way to scale it? And what is the capital required for that? I haven't come across women saying, you know, but that would mean that I need to work a few extra hours or I have to travel more. Now I don't think I'm able to do that, so let's not do that. I just haven't come across those conversations at all.
Thank you very much for being here today. Thank you. It's wonderful.
In our next session, we will discuss the impact of gender diversity on company boards and on how getting women on corporate boards helps to increase profitability with greater diversity.
The question is, how do we get there? I think that's the most important imperative. And Andrea, if I could start with you, help us understand how do sort of decisions and conversations change the moment there is better women representation in boards of large companies?
You know, it is not a fast sprint. It does take time, but gradually you have to start somewhere. Women and men approach subject matters differently, and that is healthy. It's constructive tension. I don't think a board with 100% women would be healthy either. It is a matter of having enough women who can approach the subject matter a little bit differently, listen differently, weigh in differently, and in the beginning it can be awkward, but over time it becomes the norm.
First get the numbers, then change the culture. Mr.
Yes.
Damodaran, you know, though India seems like a small number, but we've sort of made some progress over the last few years, largely because of the regulation that mandated, you know, the participation of at least one woman director on the board. Does that work? What more needs to be done?
First, let me make one basic point. We are not looking for women directors. We are looking for directors who also happen to be women. You take a large number of women who have the potential to make it to boardrooms. You also get the men. And I'm not in favor of training independent directors separately, non-independents. They all have to coexist in one boardroom.
Right.
So you get them together and then see how quickly you're able to develop them.
Sure.
We've tried it, and I can assure you it works.
Sure. Christina, you know, I want your thoughts on the fact that Norway and many European countries have sort of introduced this mandate-based approach. Norway, for instance, has 40% mandatory board representation for women. How has that worked, and does that necessarily lead to a trickle-down effect, which is also a desired outcome to see more women in the workforce?
In Norway, we have had the boardroom quota of 40% for 12 years now, and all the large listed companies comply. However, the trickle-down effect has not happened at all. So at management level, we are just as few women as we were before the law was changed. And this was not the aspirations of the politicians. So to me, this is a sign that focusing only on the board will not bring about the change we want. Still in Norway, the percentage of female CEOs in the large companies is 5%. 5%. And this is in a country where female labor market participation is 76, which is amazing. What's really important, namely focusing on bringing up women at all levels of an organization, and only then will we have a good pool of selecting candidates for the top management jobs in the future.
That's an interesting take. You're saying focusing on the board alone is not enough and doesn't necessarily lead to desired outcomes. Elizabeth, have you seen a change in their approach when it comes to gender diversity? I know you inherently believe that there is a difference in the leadership style of men in boards and women in board, and often there's a conflict. Could you share some sort of experience, some anecdotes on how that really works?
There's been a big focus recently on getting more women on boards, and we did not put a quota into place, but there were targets, because that was a preferred route. So there is a movement, and it's becoming more and more fashionable, I think, for men to be thinking about these things and taking steps to change the numbers. The numbers is a step, but it's not the most important thing, because the culture is what actually makes it work or not. Because yes, women are the ones who are going to be pushing for this because it's about us, but actually it's the men who are still in the corridors of power. Those are the ones in the positions of power. So as many advocates as we can get, the better.
Why do we need to justify women's presence on boards with this whole economic rationale argument? Because we don't give an economic rationale every time we induct a man on a board.
It's counterintuitive to make an economic rationale just for one gender. When there's such underrepresentation, it becomes one factor in creating the logic and the decision-making power.
Do you believe that the tipping point is three women women on a board of 10 or 12? Why is that important?
The research internationally about majority groups and minority groups has shown with every majority and every minority, and you need 25% of a group for that group to have a voice. But 30% actually starts to change the culture of the place. When you think about the fact that we have in the world 51% of the population are women, it's still low relative to the talent that's in that female pool.
Christina, so how do we solve the problem? In the case of Norway, which has got, which has done remarkable progress, one of the reasons is because, female participation in the workforce is very high, over 70%, whereas in India it's about 25%. Given that context, how do we solve this problem?
As a political scientist myself, I do believe in policy choices and the importance of policy choices in this respect. We introduced a year's parental leave, a third of it being reserved for the father. We introduced full coverage of daycare, and those policy choices made female labor market representations spike. Those were important policy choices for Norway. And the reason why we, from the employers' organizations, care so much about this is that this is of immense economic value to Norway. You can just imagine having 76% of the women being part of the labor force. It brings the state so much revenue, it brings the companies talent and ambition, and I can't really overestimate how much importance this is to Norway.
Do you also believe that the push needs to come from, asset owners? It needs to come from financial investors. They need to sort of, insist on having a greater, because at the end of the day, they are in some sense, stakeholders of the company.
I think all of us know that the presence of women on boards adds value. If you get enough of a causal relationship that's established, the investors will push for it. When we talked about corporate governance 15 years ago, it was thought to be an expenditure. The fact that it is an investment and that you get a governance premium, that recognition came later. So the understanding that there is value that resides in getting the board rightly composed with a few women on it, if you can establish that relationship scientifically.
Silicon Valley, in some sense, has been a sort of trigger for the whole movement against bro culture. Do you think that having more women on the board will fundamentally change that, and how?
Absolutely. I don't think it's the only answer. I think probably you're hearing from all of us that it is one element, and I don't think the magic bullet is having 30% women on boards, but it is part of a constituent. They have the responsibility for the culture, the strategy, and the people in a company. That is the role of a director. And without that group having the responsibility and the bearing the weight, how can you have a culture change in the company if there's no culture change on the board? So I think it's mandatory. I think it's happening.
Thank you to this wonderful panel, the experts, for showing a way ahead on increasing more women participation in the board. Big round of applause for this panel. Thank you so much.
That brings us to the end of part 1 of the Economic Times Women's Forum. Next week, we will bring to you another exciting episode celebrating the spirit and talent of women all around the world.
Partnered by Times Influence.